Good day, everyone. So, are we just a world of addicts or what? I watched this show yesterday or the day before. It was like a little documentary on BBC, and what was it called? How to Get a Life. It's like a series that this lady does, where she goes around and does various subjects. But the one particular video I ran across was called Addictions. Like, are we just addicted? I can't remember the name of it. It was fascinating. Nothing really new under the sun. I mean, I've been analyzing human addiction since I was young to ask, why do I do certain things, Why do I have compulsive behaviors? And sometimes some of our addictions create other addictions, such as if a person's anybody who's had chronic pain, who's had to take opiates. Many people, I don't know if everyone's the same as me, but when I take opiates for pain, it makes me want to smoke more cigarettes. It gives you that kind of, I need to smoke. And this is why I avoid them, on top of other reasons, but certain addictions tend to bring out others. Alcohol, if a person drinks, often, drops that inhibition level, and a person will, I'll just do a line of Coke or something, These are just examples, but the show covered a wide variety of people and their addictions. One girl was addicted to dieting. Another guy was a bodybuilder who was addicted to nitrous. Did nitrous hits with his friend, which is really funny because I actually did a nitrous hit while I was watching it. Because I enjoy nitrous once in a while. Sure, I know what it does. I know how it affects the body. I know it's not a smart thing to do. It's not an addiction kind of thing for me. It's something that once in a while I'll be like, I'll do a whippet. But for this guy, he was doing it like 5 times a week, a whole bunch of them with his friends. And when they asked him why he did nitrous, he said because he doesn't believe in doing illegal drugs. I guess the idea that he was a dumb bodybuilder kind, and then doing nitrous doesn't really add on to that. And I'm not generalizing bodybuilders, don't get me wrong. I'm saying this particular guy was already kind of doofy, and nitrous will just make you dumb. But he was addicted to it because he thought it was a legal high. It was something that brought him to a good feeling that made him, something that worked for him. My point being that addictions can be anything. There are people that are addicted to sex. There are people who are addicted to drugs, of course. There are people who are addicted to shopping and the excitement that comes from that, the dopamine release from buying something new, serotonin. Some people are addicted to love. They're overly loving with their, say, children or family because they're addicted to compassion and love. And these aren't all bad things. This is just human nature. We get addicted to things that make us feel good. So, I mean, that's kind of like, the basis of where addiction comes from. It's a feeling we get that we carry with us. It kind of sucks, but everybody has it to one degree or another, I think. There are people out there who will constantly berate others for their addictions. And what I've found is that the people who tend to berate others the most are those who are least in touch with their own addictions, or least willing to admit them. For example, the people who are very opposed to cannabis. They may be addicted to, let's say, a person who's addicted to, or opposed to cannabis use, and calling all people who smoke pot just losers and stoners and a waste of society, go home to beat their kids, let's say, because they're addicted to violence, and they don't even realize it. That's just normal to them. And I'm just speaking of one person, not generalizing people who don't smoke pot, please. Each person has their faults, and I think that life is what brings these addictions to light. It's people in the let's see, alternative community that believe in, okay, I won't use the word alternative, my bad. People who are in the mindset of believing in reincarnation will tell you that your addictions today resonate addictions that you had in previous lives, that you're supposed to conquer these addictions in this life. I've never bought into that. I just can't. It doesn't make sense to me, although it's not that I don't believe that it's possible. It's not taking accountability for this life. No matter what caused an addiction in this life, we could say that it's from a past life or whatnot, but we'll never be able to prove that or know that. Some people have regression and they'll say, oh, well, I was this person who had this addiction, but maybe it's something like a person who's already a certain type of person. Maybe old souls or past, lives gravitate towards a person that's of a certain type. Rather than the person being the reincarnation, maybe the reincarnation moves to the person. I'm just totally speculating here because it's all open for interpretation. But anyway, to stick with the addiction thing, it's tough all around. I've seen people addicted to just about everything you can imagine. And hi, squirrel. And that sometimes people even get addicted to, like, well, why even go into the addictions, I guess. I'm just trying to really, open up a dialogue for addiction. It's a major component of our lives. Our bodies have these natural systems. And, when a person took an opiate, say a person does heroin, or a person, takes OxyContin, science already knows why that works. It's because it's stimulating our natural dopamine, our endorphins, endogenous morphine, and at the same time it simulates that morphine, I guess. It's, the actual, I'm not trying to give you the actual workings of it, but it uses a part of your body that is already in order, a system that exists for painkiller properties, among other things. And it utilizes that and kind of gives it an overload. Now, cannabis was always just looked upon as something that got people high, until they found out that the body has the endocannabinoid system, which regulates everything. I mean, sleep, appetite, nausea, pain, all kinds of different things. And now we're finding that all these drugs work on these different systems, all the addictive drugs, and I'm just trying to go with the ones that people consume the most. Serotonin and dopamine are major components of how we feel. When you take MDMA or any psychedelic, I don't consider MDMA a psychedelic, so I'm setting that aside separately. They imitate serotonin. They are actually almost identical in chemical makeup to serotonin, and your brain doesn't know the difference. So they attach to the receptors that create your reality and cause a new reality. And this is what psychedelic experience is. So let's visit another angle of this. I wanted to cover, since I covered, the way that, drugs affect certain parts of your body, I wanted to talk about addictions that trigger our natural system. When you go into, say, a fight or flight, you get that adrenaline rush. This is why people become addicted to bungee jumping, skydiving, things like this, because you're stimulating your body's natural system. I believe, what is that, the endocrine system? Anyway, I found that certain behaviors release chemicals into the bloodstream which create a feeling of well-being for the person. This can become very addictive. A spiritual experience creates one of these feelings. It's anybody who's had a moment where you were like, a moment of clarity, or a satori or awakening experience, you can become addicted to that, It's almost like a high. I've had moments where everything makes sense, and then for a few months afterwards, I'm addicted to this happiness, this just ecstatic energy. And by reading more about whatever subject I'm into, I gain more of that. And so I see that as an addiction too. Just like the internet that I'm using to get the information. They're all addictions. And while I'm on that, the internet is actually one of the strongest addictions. They found that people have a harder time quitting the internet than they do other drugs. I can't remember the specific drugs that they compare them against, but it releases, it gives you the same feeling as doing cocaine or anything else. It's people think that since it's a natural feeling, it's okay, and is it, is an addiction to a substance any worse than an addiction to a feeling? Is using a substance to get to a point any worse than getting to that point through other means? Let me take another angle for this. Go back to psychedelics for a minute. Very few people get addicted to psychedelics, but a few do. And it's a complete mental addiction. There's no physical addiction whatsoever. But mental and physical are one and the same. So when people talk about mental and physical addictions, they really are the same thing in a lot of ways. They become addicted to the awareness and the revealing that psychedelics give them. Well, sometimes people of, say, Buddhist persuasion will get into intense meditation and practice to try to attain this awakening of the third eye, this enlightenment, and spend years of their life dedicated to these causes. And one might look at that and say that's a noble thing, but is that an addiction? Are they addicted to enlightenment? When you take addiction and you compare it to a word in Buddhism, it would be attachment. Attachment to anything. Addiction and attachment are very much one and the same. We just label them differently. Never really thought about it that way. I have my addictions, and I am an authority on this subject. Sometimes people will poke at my addictions, and I'll get, none of your business kind of thing. That's just how addictions are. I've considered all of my addictions. I know. I wake up, I've got to have my coffee. That kind of stuff. I actually have broken my addiction to sugar, because I used to wake up and I'd put like 3 teaspoons of sugar in my coffee every day and make 3 or 4 cups a day. So I just stopped buying sugar. I can't make cookies, I can't make anything, and that's fine. I go into the cupboard to get it, it's not there, that's fine. If it's not there, I won't use it. And a lot of other addictions are the same way. It's really funny. Sugar, of all things, So while I'm drinking my sugarless coffee and kicking back in the room, not fulfilling other addictions because it's not time yet, such as smoking weed, I'm fulfilling an addiction right now. Making videos, It's just, it's an addiction. It's not a bad one. It's not something that I have to do. It's just something that I want to do. The internet and YouTube is an addiction to an extent. When I took a week off a few months back, that was a long week. Because I didn't do any type of networking or anything. And I abandoned Facebook a couple years back. That's when I joined YouTube. I'd already had my account, and I thought, well, I'm not getting anything across with people on Facebook. Nobody wants to talk about anything interesting. So I'm just going to make a couple random videos and post them on YouTube. And within a few months, I became just obsessed with it. It was so fun. And it's not about being noticed. It's not about subs. It's not about any of that. I've made it a point to actually keep the subject matter, and avoid certain keywords so I don't get a bunch of fanatics. I don't want, I'm not trying to attract people. So the addiction isn't with people or being noticed. So I'm like, well, what is it? Is it an addiction of communication? Is it an addiction of learning? An addiction of sharing? I don't know. Is it even an addiction at all? The last few days I've had really no interest to make videos, but then sometime during the day all of a sudden I'm like, I just want to talk about this, and I make one, So, those are my addictions. I've got various addictions, but, I don't beat myself up over it.
I realized that so many of our life events cause us so much grief, and it's easy for us to blame our addictions on things that happen to us, such as I was a person saying I was abused by a kid, or a person that said that their wife left them and took their kids, or um, they had an excruciating pain episode, or they lost a limb, or whatever. Everybody uses excuses. We all do it. Even a lot of cannabis users. Sure, it helps the cannabinoid system, but does that mean you need it for that? Maybe. Some people do, some people don't. Instead of us trying to justify our addictions, that's what I'm saying, I think we should embrace them and understand why we have them. And only the individual can do that. You can go to counseling and talk to someone that can maybe help you understand why you have addictions, but it doesn't mean you're going to be able to get rid of them that easily. And they might end up being replaced with something more harmful, which I've seen happen. And so just remember, we're all human. Don't beat yourself up over it. And if I could leave on one more note, it would be to keep your addictions under control as much as you can. For me, I smoke pot. I've been smoking it for 25 years. I've quit for a couple years in between. I wait till at least noon before I smoke pot. I don't do awake and bake and be stoned all morning. That's my thing. And that's part of my control. That's part of what I do. And I don't smoke very much because I don't like being super stoned. That's just one of my addictions, and that's just my justification. Knowing thyself is key, because maybe that's why I get frustrated when people point out flaws in me, is because I already know. It's like I'm totally aware of them. I'm not in denial of my own problems, my own addictions. It's part of who I am. For now. Maybe one day I'll be able to live the clean life, but honestly, when I see those living the clean life, I always find that they have addictions to other things, whether it's ideas, places, emotions, actions, adrenaline. We're all just people. It's a tough, confusing ride, and we do whatever we can to ease the burden. Well, this was supposed to be a short video about addictions, but as usual, it's turned into a long video. It's a very deep subject for me, one I've thought about a lot. And I just wanted to finish up by saying that, someone asked me the other day if I think that intelligent people are more likely to be depressed. And my answer to that is absolutely. Absolutely. I was reluctant to answer that question, because it's like when you say, the only way I can know that is by using myself. And by saying that, I have to consider myself an intelligent person. And I try to be humble, I'm intelligent in some ways, but a complete idiot in some ways probably too. So that's, so I guess in the ways that I'm intelligent, the ways that I consider myself smart, intelligent, it does cause depression, because, but it doesn't, I'm not depressed. There's the key right there. I have been in the past. In my early 30s, when I first got into, or first started going through kind of my early life crisis. A lot of people go through it when they're in their 50s, whatever, 40s, late 30s. People have all kinds of different times in their life. When it hits you sooner, like in your early 30s, I think that's when a person has built up too much too fast, as far as trying to understand the world around them. I became overwhelmed, and I went through this period of depression. And the more I thought about it, the more depressed I became. And it wasn't so much a depression, like a sinking depression where I was just out of commission. It was more of an anxiety, because it converted itself from depression into anxiety, because I was having anxiety about, and I had to ask myself why. I said, is it my addictions? Is it the way I'm living my life? I realized what it was. It was fear of death. I had to admit that to myself. I had to realize that this is the root of my fears, and that's why I always say that the root of all fears is fear of
not necessarily death, but loss of consciousness. So for some people, the, the prospect of getting Alzheimer's is much worse than dying. So I used that time in my life to kind of understand myself better and try to ask myself, how am I going to get over this, like, this depression of trying to figure out what it's all about? And my solution was to stop trying to figure out what it's all about as far as the main details, you know, knowing that I'll never know certain things, and working on what I can know. But I medicated more during that time of depression, you know. And I think that intelligent people are not only more likely to be depressed, but more likely to use drugs for that depression. And if you look back through history at inventors, you know, famous creators and artists and painters and virtuosos, they're almost all addicts or strange in one way or another. They may have an addiction to something is like writing, or, you know, compulsions, let's say. Maybe not addictions, but compulsions. Many of them, when they got into their older years, ended up shutting themselves in. People like Tesla. Tesla went nuts. So did Einstein. Most people don't realize that, but he spent the later years of his life trying to reconcile God with science, and it drove him nuts. Maybe not mentally crazy, but these are the issues that we face, these crises that we hit in our life, and it has to do with thinking. So you can either choose to abandon thought and just live your life, say, I'll take a religion, I'll take a job, a career, and a family, and I'm good to go. And that works for a lot of people. But for those who, in the deep depths of our mind, that just doesn't work, that we can't just take a belief and be happy with it, it doesn't work, that's really difficult to explain to people who do have beliefs. But I think that, in a nutshell, belief is an addiction. And that's what I'm kind of getting at. That we can become attached to an idea because it makes us comfortable. And to make sure I'm not misunderstood here, I'm not saying that that's a bad thing. I think that's human nature. And you'll find patterns in addictions. Now, a person who is an addict of a particular drug will tend to be more pushy on their groups of friends, or maybe hang out with people who do that, who reinforce that, and may even try to get their friends to try this new addiction. Not to hurt anybody, but because they want them to be part of it too, so they're not alone in it. And often, belief systems are the same way. People only are attracted to people who believe the same thing, because that reinforcement creates a feeling of well-being, which becomes almost an addiction, or a compulsion, if you will. And we don't even realize we're doing it. So, in a nutshell, we all live in this crazy world, and we're all working together to do the best we can, or at least some of us are. I don't have any illusions. There's a lot of people out there who are total fuckwads. People who want nothing but to harm others. People who thrive on misery. People who love watching other people squirm. And you know what? That's an addiction. That is an addiction too. Trolling for people is an addiction, because they get a rush, from people getting angry at them. It gives them that feeling of excitement. That's a natural endogenous system in your body that you're activating by pissing people off. And that becomes an addiction. So, I guess to look at everything for what it really is. Anything that gives you a feeling that you do regularly can be a compulsion or addiction. So rather than looking at it like we need to conquer all our addictions, how about we need to figure out how to make them work for us? Because I've never met anybody who's not an addict. Peace out.